Junior Kumalo, thank you tonight. For more on that conversation, joined now by Judges Matter Mbekezeli Benjamin. Good to have you, and thank you very much for coming on this evening.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Tawa, and to the viewers at home.
Quite telling that the very same person that you would praise for the establishment of the office of the Chief Justice is the very same one who would have tested, I suppose, the judiciary and its independence to its fullest extent.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting and quite an ironic story because, like Chief Justice Zondo gave former President Zuma praise, he was really instrumental alongside Minister Jeff Radebe and Chief Justice Mogoeng in establishing the Office of the Chief Justice as a national government department that is responsible for administering the judiciary. And of course, they did this in 2014, but it was work that had started all the way in 2004. But where I think has been the biggest issue is that the work hasn't really gone further than the initial stages, and which is what Chief Justice Zondo spoke about in the later part of his speech, to say that the subsequent administration after the Zuma administration didn't really take up the job of securing the full independence of the judiciary, and they really left it at that time. And of course, speaking about the challenges to the judiciary, yes, that test of July 2021 was one of the greatest, and it's quite funny and ironic that the same character, the same protagonist who helped judicial independence was one of the key people to harm judicial independence.
I wonder, though, if the Chief Justice's citing of that is not going to put him at crosshairs again with the detractors of the judiciary, to say he's quite personal about some of his commentary.
Well, I don't think it would be fair to do so in this case, because if we are quite honest, July 2021 was a really traumatic moment for our country. It was a really traumatic moment for our judiciary. As I understand it, even today, some members of the judiciary still have to have bodyguards and other security because of the events of July 2021, where there were personal threats against judges, there were threats against their homes and their families. And so it is fair for the Chief Justice to highlight that moment as one of those moments where judicial independence was tested. Of course, he didn't stop there, and the story does not stop there. There have been other threats that have been made to other judicial officers and the judiciary. And maybe if I think he had more time, he could have highlighted the others. I think one of them was a judge in Johannesburg. That came out during the media briefing that the Chief Justice gave. So I don't think that he was being personal at all in this instance. Yeah. He was really highlighting a point that is quite valid.
This format that the Office of the Chief Justice is calling for, where is it working? I mean, if you look at some of the developed countries, you have presidents who appoint judges. He's calling for a format where not even the Department of Justice is responsible for the buildings and the paying of judges and magistrates, a fully independent Office of the Chief Justice.
Yeah, so South Africa falls between two really common models in the world. In parts of the world, like Kenya, like the United States, the judiciary really runs its own operations. They set their own budgets. They determine how much money goes to the courts and how much money is budgeted for, and they look at the spending. There are other countries, of course, like the United Kingdom and many former Commonwealth countries that still have the judiciary as part of the executive. South Africa sits between those two, and that is the big debate that is not only dominating the proceedings of the conference this week, but it has been coming for a number of years, that in South Africa, judges have no control, for example, over the buildings and how much money is spent in courtrooms. They can't even buy their own stationery for their own offices. And so that is the frustration that they have, and which is why they are pushing very hard for this fully independent system where they are able to determine their own resources and use them in order to pursue justice. Of course, the government and the executive really are pushing back against some of that because they are worried about some of the accountability measures. So it is a debate between the two, and this is something that the Chief Justice mentioned earlier today, to say the executive has its own proposal, and they were supposed to actually meet last week to decide what is the best model for the judiciary going forward, and that meeting has now been postponed to next year. But it is a really hot debate this week and going forward into the future.
The image of the judiciary taking a beating in some instances, or at least an attempt at being tarnished, is it warranted?
Well, not entirely. Like the Chief Justice said, our judges are well renowned. They have an international reputation for staying loyal to their oath of office, for having integrity, for respecting the rule of law and their role as judges. But of course, there are some things that we are concerned about. We as Judges Matter are particularly concerned about how slow the judiciary deals with judges who don't follow the rules. So judges who are involved in misconduct-related cases, those cases take far too long, and that has an impact on the image and integrity of the judiciary. But overall, I would say our judiciary has a really good image, and it's really in their hands to maintain that good image.
What is the intent really of this conference, and what should be under or on the table, at least for discussion amongst the judges?
Well, look, the conference hasn't happened in the last 12 years. So the last conference that happened, the Judges Conference, was in 2011. And that's a very long time for judges not to come together. It's actually unusual. If you go anywhere in the world, it's unusual to see such a long period between judges' conferences. Part of the conference is really a family meeting. The judges are supposed to come together to build that network, to build that unity and that spirit. But the most serious part of the conference is to debate some of the big policy issues. So one of them is the issue of judicial administration and what is the best way to secure judicial independence. The other one is to discuss topics like the financing of the judiciary. The other one is a policy on sexual harassment in the judiciary. We know that is a burning issue that has not been resolved for some years. And so part of what this conference is supposed to do is to discuss that that policy and resolve on it, because it is an urgent need.
Mbekezeli Benjamin, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on for Judges Matter there, Mbekezeli Benjamin.